Welcome to Valerie's kitchen. No, I'm not Valerie, but I am in her kitchen. And so this morning I am going to prepare a biscuit recipe. I thought I'd take this opportunity to share with you a recipe that I found online for biscuits. You know, I grew up in a southern home and with a family of 4 brothers and a sister, and so my mom loved to prepare biscuits for us as part of our staple to the morning breakfast. And so I've been searching online for a recipe for biscuits, and I found so many recipes that advertise that the results are going to be a nice fluffy biscuit, but it always included additional oils, vegetable oil, different margarines, things of that nature. And so I set out to try to find a vegan type of biscuit recipe. And I did some searching online and came across this one recipe that, according to the instructions, only require about 5 or 6 ingredients. And it's very simple to make, and I've made this at least 3 times before in the past, and each time the biscuits came out nice and fluffy. And so we're going to post the ingredients for you, the directions for you, of course, with this video. But the ingredients you're going to need are whole wheat pastry flour, all-purpose flour, brown sugar, which we're not going to use a lot of that, an aluminum-free baking powder, and a little vinegar. And I'm following this recipe, as I said, according to the instructions that were given. And there's one other main ingredient I need to get out of the refrigerator, so bear with me a minute. When you think about all the oil, margarine, and all these other things that are typically added to biscuits to make them nice and fluffy, this recipe only requires a nice cold can of coconut milk. And when I first read this, I thought, man, that's no way that can work. But after you try it, you will be surprised of how nice and flaky your biscuits will be if you follow these instructions. So the first thing that we're going to do is put all of our dry ingredients in a bowl and sort of mix them up, okay? The first item on the dry ingredients list is the flour. I am going to mix my flour. The instructions call for 2 1/4 cups of unbleached flour. So what I typically do is split that in half, meaning that I do half of unbleached all-purpose. So I'll do a cup of unbleached all-purpose flour, and I'll do a cup of whole wheat pastry flour. Okay, and that's going to give them a nice, healthy brown color. And I'm going to get 1/4 of a cup here. And my 1/4 of a cup of flour, I am going to, right now, I'm going to sit this aside to add later if need be. So we've got our flour. We're needing to add 3 teaspoons of baking powder. So a non-aluminum baking powder. And we're going to add 3 teaspoons. 1, 2. Okay, there's our baking powder. That's our second ingredient. The next ingredient, 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I'm not going to use a lot of salt in here. I think that'll do it for me. 1 tablespoon of cane sugar, and that's where the brown sugar comes in. And once again, I don't like super sweet biscuits, so if you like your biscuits to have a little sweetness to them, you can. So instead of a tablespoon, I'm probably just going to use a teaspoon of brown sugar. Okay. And so that takes care of all of the dry ingredients. And so I'm going to sort of mix those up. Make sure that baking powder gets distributed throughout the entire mixture. Okay. And so this is what it should look like. These are your dry ingredients. And I'm going to grab a small bowl. So I have a small bowl here for the wet ingredients. And as I said, there's only 5 or 6 different items for this recipe. Just to mention, the oven's already preheating to 450 degrees. So my wet ingredients are basically a tablespoon of vinegar and the coconut milk. So I'm going to add the rice vinegar, and I think down the road we're going to look into an alternative for vinegar as a whole for this recipe. But right now I'm just following the recipe as I found it online. With that vinegar, I'm going to open my nice cold can of coconut milk. And this coconut milk has been sitting in the fridge overnight. One thing I do want to stress with this recipe, the coconut milk must be cold, okay? You can't pull the coconut milk off the shelf and use it in this recipe. It must sit in the fridge and it must be cold, okay? So I'm going to add that to the vinegar. Make sure I get it all out of there. Okay, and I'm going to just mix that up. And those are my ingredients. And so now I make a well using my teaspoon in the middle of my dry ingredients. Looks something like that. And I'm going to pour in my wet ingredients and start folding over. And I'll start folding this over to mix it up. Okay, hopefully you can see that. I'm just folding this over to mix my wet and dry ingredients. And I'm going to go ahead and add some of that fourth of additional flour that I had on hand. And I'm just folding this over to get it to come together, mix up together. Now, once you get this all mixed up together, you're going to need some additional flour. And so what I tend to do with this recipe is add a little more flour onto some parchment paper, which I have right here in front of you, because we're going to need to spread our dough out a little bit so we can form the biscuits. So I'm just going to set that aside, and I'm going to scoop out some more flour and spread it over my parchment paper, because I don't want the dough to stick to the parchment paper once we start to form the biscuits, and attempt to pick those up. Just using your nice clean hand, spread out your dough. Now, according to the instructions, this should make about 9 biscuits. So if you try to stretch it too far, I added a little dough to the flour because I want to knead it here with my hand a little to try to reduce some of the stickiness. So I can pick it up out of this bowl and lay it onto my parchment paper so that I can form my biscuits. Okay. Okay, so now I got this nice ball of dough. I got my floured parchment paper, and so I'm ready to lay this out onto the parchment paper, and then I'm just going to flatten it out some. I don't roll it because I don't want it too thin, because you want nice fluffy biscuits. And once again, you just want to flatten it out enough to where you can form about 9 biscuits. Okay. And I try to keep the dough somewhere around 1 inch thick or so, or a little more. All right. And so it should look something like this. Hopefully you can see that. Move it over here in the middle. Okay. And so if you have a biscuit cutter or something of that nature that can help form your biscuit, here is the small glass that I would like to use to help form the biscuits. Okay. And basically what I'm going to do here is just go around the outer edge and form my biscuits so they'd be nice and round. Okay, so you see that? I have a nice round biscuit, and I'm just going to go around the edge and do this. If you have a cutter, fine. If not, use a glass. Works just as well. Okay, that's 3. And I may end up with more than 9, which is fine. It's 4. And I like to put them fairly close together. It's just the way they always came out of the oven when my mother made them. So put them together so they can rise together. They can rise up together. Sounds like a Bible verse. So I've made 8. This is my 9th, and I still have some dough left over. So once I make the last one that I can form from the original dough, I am going to take what was remaining and reform it into a ball. flatten it out again. Flatten this out. Once again, I didn't use a roller. If you want to roll, that's fine, but I'm going to flatten this out. A little bit of this flour, and I'm going to form a few more. Okay, there's one. And this is about right for me as far as the number of biscuits I can get out of this recipe. So I made two. I'm going to roll it again, or flatten it out a little. And I could leave that. That would be a pretty nice sized biscuit though. So I'm going to flatten it out and just make one more. It's going to fit in my pan. At some point you'll get to where you can just form one biscuit by hand. And that's what I have here, just one biscuit. It's a little larger than the other ones, but I'm just going to form that one by hand. And that's pretty much it. If you want to sprinkle a little more flour over the top, you can. My wife always stresses that I use this non-stick pad that's oven safe, and so I would use that. I'm going to put these in the oven, and in about 20 to 25 minutes we're going to come back and take a look at our nice 5-ingredient vegan biscuit. Okay, we are back. The biscuits have cooked in the oven for about 20 to 25 minutes. I would like to stress that you do not overcook them. And also remember, the coconut milk has to be cold. So you want to put it in the fridge the night before so it can be nice and cold. So here in front of you are the vegan biscuits. I'm going to move this a little closer to the camera so you can see that. And these are ready for some molasses or however you like to prepare them. This is the inside of the biscuits. You see they're nice and soft, very tasty. And the recipe does allow for some tweaking. If you want to make more of a garlic and herb biscuit, so with the dry ingredients, just add in some garlic and herb. Sometimes I'll add in some Dahlia vegan shredded cheese to give them more of a cheesy flavor. So there are several different things that you can do with these vegan biscuits. What I like to do with them is maybe spread some jelly, get a vegan sausage patty. They're just the right size for a vegan sausage patty, and maybe some vegan cheese spread on top of that. One other thing I like to do is to add a little blackstrap molasses on a plate with your nice hot biscuits and taste away. I hope you will enjoy this recipe. For me, it was necessary to find it because I like a healthy biscuit, but I don't like to use a lot of the oils, a lot of the butters and things of that nature to create a nice fluffy biscuit. But as you can see with these, nice and fluffy. You know, they're not hard on the top like some biscuits are. They won't crumble apart when you take a bite. They're going to be nice and fluffy and tasty. And once again, if you want to make a few adjustments to the recipe, feel free. It's not mine. It's one that I found online. And if you come up with a very good addition to these biscuits, feel free to let us know, because we'd like to maybe update our recipe and give that a shot. So, as we say here in Valerie's kitchen, bon appetit. Good. That one needs some molasses. We hope you enjoy this video from Redeeming Truth Ministry.